Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Matthew. So again, welcome again. We have one of our third or fourth series in the UNICOM talks that we've been doing this semester. So this talk that we have Tomas, and we have a number of students that are here. They're going to talk a lot about the experiences with NASA, especially internships and co-ops. So if you're interested in one of those, then definitely you're at the right spot. Also, we're going to keep this pretty informal. So Tomas is going to talk about a few things, but a lot of it's going to be kind of an open Q&A. So this is your guys' chance to answer or ask and hopefully get answers to a lot of questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. So let's see, a couple things I want to say. So like Matt said, I'm going to talk a little bit first, and then mostly let you all interact with the other students here with experience. So for those of you that don't know me, Tomas Gonzalez-Torres, I did graduate from Iowa State many eons ago because I'm old. But while I was here, graduated Aerospace Engineering, and I was an intern with what is now called Pathways. It was just called the co-op program at the time. And so I ended up doing actually 6 internships, which is kind of unheard of. Most people do 2 or 3. It ended up delaying my graduation, of course, but I really didn't care because I wanted to work for NASA. That's all I wanted to do since I was this tall. And once I got there, I wanted to stay there, right? And so I tell every student, anybody that will listen, you should do an internship. Maybe it'll delay graduation. If you do it during the summer, maybe it won't. But if you think you know what you want to do, then go do an internship there, okay? If you hate it, now you know what you don't want to do, right? So either way, it's a win-win. A lot of people have a certain vision of what it's going to be like to work for a certain company, and you think it's such and such a thing. You go work there, and you're like, that is not what I thought it was going to be. So why waste the next 3 years, right, of your life taking classes, doing something, and focusing on a certain area that's not what you want to do? So you might as well get the experience in real world. That real world experience also looks great on your resume, right? Whether you end up working for that company or a different one, it will help you in the future to also get a job. All right, so when I graduated, actually during my internships, I worked for the EVA group, extravehicular activities that train the astronauts to do spacewalks. I was then hired into that group, and when I got hired in, because I had so much experience, I jumped ahead of some new hires. I knew the center, Johnson Space Center is where I worked. I knew the NASA Johnson Space Center really well. I knew a lot of people there. A lot of the other interns that were my friends during that time. What was very interesting is that we all moved up into management positions at the same time, just because we were all about the same age, had the same experience. And so now, 5 or 10 years later, I know a lot of people in a lot of key different areas throughout the entire Space Center just because we co-op together. All right, so you just make these friendships and these key communications and people that you know that really pay off in the future. And so the same thing is going to happen with these individuals. The people that they met when they first got hired on, when they were still in school, they will end up in high up positions, and you'll get to know a lot of people and get a lot of good experiences there. So there are, with NASA, there are a few different internship programs. There is the program that's called NASA Interns. And in fact, you can Google NASA internships or just go to interns.nasa.gov to actually apply for these things. So there's the Interns program, and then there's the Pathways program. So the Interns program is a single semester or summer, and either NASA can support you or actually the Iowa Space Grant Consortium. And the office is in room 1234, easy to find, just down the hall. And you can come talk to us and apply for it. So either NASA supports you or we can support you as well. 3.0 GPA or above, you have to apply online, and it's research-focused internship, right? So you would get paired with a mentor that does research throughout, again, any of the NASA centers. The Pathways, and that's just a single one. You can reapply, or if the mentor really likes you, they can request that you come back. The Pathways program is kind of a continual internship program, so that's what I had. And so every other semester, you can come back. Typically, they want you to do at least 2, so they get to know you really well. And the other thing is that through the Pathways program, you become a NASA civil servant at that point. So you are a government employee when you start your Pathways program. So if you get hired on permanently, that time actually counts towards your retirement as a government employee. For the interns program, you're kind of contracted out for a single semester, again, or summer. Again, great experiences, slightly different paths, but you can do it either way. So for the Pathways program, you still apply, the same website, but then you have a phone interview, and these guys can talk a little more about that. And NASA does the full selection. So the Iowa Space Grant doesn't support you that way, or can't, is not allowed to. What else? So those are the main things. So now what I'm going to do is have the students, you each have microphones, so I'm going to start here with Abe and just have you guys go down. Why don't you guys talk about when you did an internship, where, and how you got selected. And then we'll come back around and do some more details.
So my name is Abiel Amador, and I interned at NASA Langley Research Center this past summer. How I got into NASA was through Iowa Space Grant Consortium. I ended up talking to Carmen as well as Tomas and Matt Nelson, and I talked to them about the projects that I was really interested in, and I was mainly interested in kind of materials composites research. So they helped kind of find a mentor that was looking for somebody that had that kind of research that was geared, and that's mainly how I got to work at Langley this past summer.
So I'm Dylan Mummy, and mine actually kind of started the same way. I talked with Carmen and Jay in the Iowa State Space Grant Consortium office and knew that I really wanted to go to Johnson Space Center and experience what was down there. And so after talking with them and then talking with the education office down at Johnson, which was USRA program, I landed in summer internship in 2017. And then within a year after that, I did some other rotations and was able to apply for the Pathways program, which Tomas was talking about, and then got accepted into that. So it was a wide variety of experiences. Definitely the USRA is what helped prepare me to be a better Pathways candidate.
So my name is Jacob Newman, and I did apply through the intern program, but I did not get accepted. I actually got into NASA through one of the contract companies that is paired with them, Jacobs Engineering. I just applied like a general application to there, and that's how I got in to NASA Johnson Space Center.
Hello, everybody. My name is Evan Wazorek. I've done 3 internships at JSC, so the Johnson Space Center in Houston. The first time I got in, I actually applied on a website called the OSSI, which was NASA's one-stop shopping initiative that's now been converted over to NASAinternships.com. I didn't talk to anyone here. I just applied online and got the position. And then while I was there the first time, I applied to the USA Jobs position for the NASA Pathways program. And I've been working at JSC, and I had 2 tours since then.
Okay. All right. So why don't we start over again? And Abe, why don't you tell more details about the actual work that you did during your internship?
So the project that I mainly worked on as a whole was the Advanced Composites project. So it was reducing certification time of aircraft, and mainly we were looking at different ways to do certification of composites. A subsection of that was the project that I was working on, which was doing cure monitoring and defect detection of composites while they were being cured. I didn't know anything about certification testing before I got in, so that was a really great experience. And Iowa State's actually really well known for non-destructive evaluation, so it was kind of nice to be able to talking to some of my mentors, and they were like, oh yeah, like Iowa State's really good at NDE, so it's a good thing that you're getting this kind of experience. So for the majority, I did ultrasonic testing, either with an immersion tank or other types of methods. But yeah, that was what I did for about 10 weeks. It was very exciting. There was a lot of smart people, and I definitely learned a lot, kind of geared towards what I wanted to continue doing in the future.
So my first 3 rotations was with the operations division. And so specifically what I was working on is I was working on integrating an ESA, or the European Space Agency tool, into their procedures development group. So specifically with that, one of the big things was they make a lot of procedural changes whenever the crew changes or whenever they need to switch stuff on timelines. And so it's a really big time hit. And then whenever you make a change, procedures can be referenced to other procedures. And so sometimes those changes and links within those don't get caught, and so you have a dead procedure. So the ESA tool was to effectively control F everything and look through to make sure everything was okay. So as an intern, I led the integration for the CO75 team to implement the process into what was Ops Plan, which is a flight control position, and ODF, which is the backroom control position for that. I then got accepted into Pathways, did a rotation with EVA, did a lot of stuff at the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, or the NBL, doing flight following with astronauts that were trained to go to space, and then also did stuff in mission control, and then in Building 9, which is the space vehicle mock-up facility. My last rotation, which was this last summer, was with EVA Tools. I got to work on projects for the Lunar Gateway, as well as with the moon landing coming up in 2024. So I got to work on some low-fi versions of tools that the crew will be training in Argos, which is a simulation-based simulant to allow them to be in microgravity. So a wide variety of opportunities. They allow you to do, they actually encourage you to try things out in different areas. That way you figure out what you enjoy best.
This past summer, I worked in the engineering robotics division. I specifically worked on a vibration isolation system to dampen the vibrations that the exercise equipment create on the space station. It's necessary because there's no air in space, so the vibrations just oscillate through the system, and we have to create an active and a passive system. I specifically worked on a test to make sure that the system that we designed can go through 4 or 5 million cycles and still work just as good as new.
So my first internship at NASA, I was working in the Aerosciences and Flight Mechanics division, doing integrated GNC analysis. So I was working on the commercial crew program, so the CST-100 and SpaceX Crew Dragon. They're developing those crafts independently, but there's independent analysis being conducted by NASA. So we were analyzing their GNC schemes and looking at different ascent abort scenarios to see what would happen to the vehicle in those cases. And then for my last 2 internships, I was working in the GNC operations division. So I was mainly developing displays and console tools to be used in mission control for the flight controllers flying the Orion spacecraft and the International Space Station.
So the main reason I had them talk about what they did was to let you all know that the work you do as an intern is real work, right? NASA really values their interns for immediate work and assistance with projects, but also for their future, right? I mean, these guys are the ones that they'll be looking to hire and to do future work, right? And so it's a win-win because you get to test out the company and make sure it's a good fit for you, and they get to test you out too to make sure that they like you. You know, it's a lot easier to say, yeah, I want to hire this person when you've actually had time to work with them, right? So again, internships, phenomenal experiences. So let's see, one more question for each of you, and then we'll open up to questions. Is there anything, I guess, in the application or the selection process, anything that you would have done differently, or recommendations or assistance or anything, advice that you would give them through that application process?
One of the things that I kind of wish that I did was that I looked into things sooner, because I didn't know about Space Grant until probably a year ago, to be honest. And I've wanted to work for NASA for a very long time. And so some of these people here, they've interned multiple times, and I've only got to intern once. But if I started sooner, that would have been more beneficial to me, because I would have been able to get more time in. That's one of the things. Another one of the things is when you talk to people, whether they're people that work at NASA or people that previously worked at NASA, just really let your passion show through. Like, show that you are really interested in working for them as, you know, as an intern, and you're really interested in the way that their culture is. That's something that I tried to really try to get through with the people that I talked through with Space Grant, and as well as my mentor. That was something that really helped me out.
I think one of the biggest things is just believe in yourself. Like, even if you think it's a ridiculous position, as long as you feel that you yourself feel that you meet the requirements, go ahead and apply for it, because you have nothing to lose. I think one of the biggest thing is, once you get that foot in the door, no matter what company it is, make sure you network with people. Even if it's like a small, minute task, do it, and do it to the best of your ability, because it's those small tasks that people don't enjoy doing themselves, that when they see you do them and you do it beyond what they anticipate you to do, you start standing out. And when you're networking with people, you start networking with executives and stuff like that, oh, I remember this person, when they're going down a list of candidates for the next hiring pool. So enjoy your time while you're there and shoot for it.
Yeah, like Dylan said, network with people once you get your foot in the door. It's really helpful. Just talk to people. But also, what helped me is, on my application, instead of stating facts of what I did, I tried to more tell a story, because people tend to enjoy like reading something that's just a story and kind of engages them a little bit, rather than just listing facts about what you did and past experiences.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that I do different in the application process, since it worked out for me. But I definitely recommend like taking the time to like spell out your application beyond a resume, because usually that's the only thing they're going to see like before you apply. So like, if you're applying anywhere, if you really want the job, just take the time to like customize the application and then make the most of it once you have your foot in the door.
Yeah, one thing I try to tell my students, especially the seniors who are about to graduate, is every day is an interview. Right? People are going to, whenever you get in, remember that even the smallest tasks, those are noticeable. If they can't trust you with those small tasks, they're not going to give you the big ones, right? So they're testing you out to make sure that you're going to do a good job with these little things. And again, every day is an interview. They're not going to, when you look for a management position or to move up, you know, when they're not going to start looking at you the day you apply. They're going to think back 5 years before, when you first arrived, you know, working with you in different projects. How have you composed yourself? Have you been very professional? Do you work well with others? Are you a good presenter? Do you communicate well? Are you technically competent? Are you somebody that you can trust? And they've seen that over the last 5 years. And so your application, it's like, okay, well, this is the application, but I know this person, right? So those are things to remember when you're moving on in the future. So other than that, at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions. Paul, do I need to do something to turn this thing on? Check. All right, it's on. Who has a question? I just want to toss it. Come on, somebody ask a question.
How often that's a tough question. How often, like, what's the ratio of graduate pathways to undergraduate? I mean, I'm sure, I'm not looking for like an exact answer, but just something like what are your experiences with that?
From what I know at Johnson Space Center specifically, there's probably like 70 undergrad pathways going through the program at any point in time, and maybe like 10 to 25 roughly graduate pathways.
Yeah, in my experience, the graduate is a lot more competitive.
Okay.
No, you got to hold on to it.
Oh, God.
Until you get bailed. Somebody else. No questions, so nobody's interested. You guys all know everything. There you go.
With the Iowa Space Grant Consortium, what was the process like for talking to them? Can you kind of walk me through the steps of what you did?
So the way that I did it was I essentially just walked into their office and I talked to Carmen and I was like, so I've applied to NASA. First thing that you should do, you should probably apply before you walk in. Walk in, try to get your application already filled out. Talk to them, say, hey, I heard that Space Grant Consortium has done funding in the past of students. I'm interested in X, Y, and Z fields, and this is what I'm really interested in. I was curious, what can I do to help have the possibility of get funding from the university? And it's very, at least in my experience, it's very informal. It's just kind of having a conversation about what centers are you interested in, what are some of the work that you're interested in doing, and I mean, I did my research beforehand. I knew exactly that I wanted to either try to get into Langley or try to get into Johnson, and I knew that the type of work that I wanted to do. So that was my kind of experience with it, and then they usually tell you the rest of the steps, which they make sure that you apply, and then they do some conversations, and they usually do an evaluation on who they determine has funding. I think they do that on a semester basis.
Yeah, so we have X amount of dollars set aside, and in the semester, it's a little more expensive. I wrote down the numbers, but basically you get a stipend. During the semester, you get $11,680. During the summer, you get $7,300 because it's 1 month less, basically, during the summer.
Yeah, so that's about kind of the process that I've experienced, at least for the most part. I continued staying in contact with Space Grant until they made the decision, and they kind of notified me, I think it was mid-March, early April. Carmen told me to come in, and she told me that I got a position at Langley. So that was kind of my process, at least. I'm not sure if, have your guys' processes have been any different?
Mine was really similar in that regards. Is it now an online application, is what you're saying, Tomas?
Yeah, so the interns, it's through the, there's an online application that you need to complete, whether we support you or whether NASA supports you. So they have their own, I mean, we still get our money from NASA, but they have their own funding that they can support. And we have, again, X number of dollars that we can support interns. And they can contact us and say, hey, we want to support this student. Or again, if you've done your research, you know what center, you know what types of things you want to do, we can also reach out to NASA centers and help try to place you. While we do that, we can also say, hey, and by the way, do you want to sponsor them so we don't have to use our dollars and we can support a different student, right? Yeah. But, you know, then we have to hear back from them. So that's the long part of it is, you know, they need to support or provide a mentor that will say, yeah, I reviewed this person's application, we're interested, you know, I'm good for them to come work with me. So do your research and then apply and then come talk to Carmen. But again, room 1, 2, 3, 4, just follow the NASA signs.
So when you say apply, you're talking about applying on NASA/internships or interns/.
Interns.nasa.gov,
Yeah,
I think is what it is.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, if you get into it, you can come ask questions if there's something in there that doesn't make sense. But it's really getting your name. Again, you'll have to fill out which NASA centers, what type of work, your experience. I mean, it's kind of a basic resume that you're submitting.
Thank you. Hi, so Jacob, one thing you mentioned is that you really built your resume like a story. Could you expand a little bit on that or be more specific on what that actually means?
Yeah, so essentially, like what I used to put on a resume would be, so what I did is I created a test bed for a prototype that could be going up in space. Versus instead of doing that on your application, actually say, I worked with a team to design a test bed to test 4 or 5 million cycles of a prototype that could be going up to the International Space Station to solve the problem of vibration isolation. It's a lot easier, and they understand more of what you did and why you did it versus just stating, oh, here's what I did.
One other thing to chime in is I did, and I think both Dylan and Evan have done both semester and a summer. I did 3 summers and 3 semesters, and I will tell you that I enjoyed, some of them actually were back-to-back, and I think they've done as well. It's fantastic getting a longer period of time there. A lot of students want to do a summer internship because it doesn't delay their graduation. But I know that actually NASA right now is pushing to do more semester internships because they also get you for longer. I mean, during the summer, right, it's going to take you a while just to get used to everything, and then you're actually going to do some work, and then they require that you do an exit presentation and get all your stuff done and hand it over to somebody else. And so, you know, you get a month work of work done. So if you do it during the semester, you know, you get a lot more time because you can start even in, you know, in August, and then maybe you push it and go towards, you know, closer towards Christmas and something like that. So you get a lot more time there working on your project, which they enjoy, and then you also get more time. So who else?
What's your favorite memory working at NASA?
I want to say my favorite memory was actually getting to, is actually kind of a combination, was actually getting to go through one of the flight training flows with one of the astronauts that's actually on station now. And so getting to see her train in the pool for an EVA that she did a couple weeks ago during the all-female spacewalk. That was really amazing because you get to see all this build up to everything, and then you actually get to see it happen, and it was successful. And it's just like that awe-inspiring moment of like, yeah, I was only observing and only did like the crib sheets and stuff like that, but it was still really cool to see all that just come together. And then getting to see like a Soyuz dock the space station and mission control and see the crew do the exchanging of the commander. That was pretty cool.
One of my favorite things at Langley was, it's going to sound a little bit of a cliche, but it was just kind of like the day-to-day, like being able to get into work and say, I work at NASA. And then also a bonus of being at Langley was that it was right by Langley Air Force Base. So you'd constantly see like fighter jets over the air. And sometimes like people, I'm sure people that work there for a long time, they're like, oh, that's kind of annoying. But like being able to like, you start like hearing them over and you like try to like point them out. And I'm not that much into fighter jets, but my coworker was, so he'd like point them out and he'd be like, oh, this one's a trainer. And like, we weren't allowed to take pictures of those actually because they were secret ones, but but yeah, just that kind of experience of being able to go through the day to day and say that like, yeah, I actually got to work at NASA, and also being in such a cool environment with a bunch of people that were really passionate about what they do.
So what I got to do is it's called the Bomb Technician Workshop in the robotics division. They essentially bring in bomb technicians throughout all the different areas of the military, and they pair them up with NASA engineers, and they have 1 week to essentially build a robot to overcome an obstacle. This year we had to create one robot to climb 4 different sets of stairs and 4 different sets of ladders that have different heights, different sizes and everything. And that was just really fun to essentially meet someone for 1 day and then spend the next week with them building a very complex robot to do multiple different tasks. It was really fun just to get to know everyone and what their strengths and weaknesses were.
Yeah, so one of the best parts about working at the Johnson Space Center is that there are astronauts everywhere. So you could just be sitting in the cafeteria and an astronaut could be eating lunch in his flight suit next to you. But one of the astronauts who's retired, Leland Melvin, you guys should Google him. He has a photo of him in his spacesuit with his 2 dogs licking his face. It's very, very cute. Classic photo. But he was actually in town for one day, and one of the interns saw him and was like, hey, can you do a talk today? And so with like an hour's notice, all the interns came over to a building, and Leland Melvin gave us a speech, but he didn't have anything prepared, so we just got to talk to him for an hour and ask him questions about life, what his life is like. And he actually has a really interesting story. Highly recommend buying his autobiography and reading it. But definitely all the astronauts. And Clayton gave a talk while we were down there too, and it was also good, but Leland was very personal, and that was personable. Yeah, and that was fantastic.
So one more memory I'd like to share. I think one of the coolest parts about getting to work at NASA is not just being there and working at NASA, but it's getting to inspire the next generation. So we actually got to go to an elementary school in Houston, and it was an all Spanish-speaking school, and I don't speak Spanish, so I didn't understand anything they were saying except for like some simple words. But one of the coolest parts was we did a VR demonstration and gave them a tour of space station. And one of the coolest parts was just getting to see the kids take off the VR, then put it back on and be like, wow, this is space? So like just planting those seeds really early and getting to see just their faces light up, and then they're all like giddy and go to the next station, and then you do like the distance from what is actually like a scale replica from the Earth to the Moon and Earth to the ISS, and then Mars, you say go run 5 miles, and they're like, what? So like getting to do those things with little kids and even like older kids in middle school and stuff like that is really amazing.
What else?
Okay, this is a question for Abe. It's kind of very targeted, sorry. But so you mentioned that your internship was focused on composites and ultrasound. And I guess I'm kind of curious, were you there more for the composites or for the NDE? And if it is NDE, was ultrasound the only type of NDE you performed, or were you exposed to other types?
So the reason that I got put on that project was because of my previous composites knowledge, but Langley Research Center has a ton of non-destructive testing. The department that I was in wasn't so much NDE, it was more advanced materials and processing, but the building right next to mine was a lot of NDE. I think there was obviously ultrasonic, and I think they had a little bit of thermography, X-ray. I didn't actually meet a lot of interns that were talking about it, but that's because there was like, I think over 100 Langley interns there, and I only got to know the people that were in kind of my small area. But yeah, there's a ton of non-destructive work that is going on at Langley.
For those of you in the rotational program, how did you know what division you would be in? When you returned, did you get a say in what division you went to next? And if so, how did you position yourself to go to the division you wanted to go to?
So when I was starting, I knew that I wanted to be in the GNC field. And I actually was on my NASA internship when I was down there the first time when I heard that I got pathways, but I knew I wouldn't be back for another year. So I actually pseudo-interviewed with a bunch of organizations and found one that I really liked, and I talked to them, and I strongly urged them to ask the internship coordinators for me since I had no actual say in my first placement. And so they place you for the first time. And then after interning there, I really liked the organization, but I was working on the Orion vehicle, which isn't flying yet, and I wanted to do stuff with a space vehicle that was currently flying. So I asked my manager to place me on the ISS program, and so then I was able to work with the ADCO Council, and that's where I ended up, and I really liked that. So it was just talking to the orgs and positioning yourself in a place where they want you to work for them as well.
I think for mine, one of the big things was my very first experience getting to go down there was USRA. And so my first rotation was during the summer, so it was short. Like Tomas said, really you only have like 6 weeks because you have all the presentations, and it takes a week to get your laptop sometimes. But during that time, I took advantage of it and tried to network with as many people as possible. So like Evan going down there, I knew the area that I wanted to go into, which was the Flight Operations Directorate. I had 2 divisions that I specifically was interested in, specifically 2 groups within that, and one of those was the Operations Division, specifically Ops Plan, which is in charge of doing timeline and day-to-day activities for a space station, and then the other one was EVA, which is the training for the crew to do spacewalks and stuff like that, specifically within that EVA tasks. And so one of my goals was while I was there was to network with those people, but also get other experiences that would allow me to have intelligent conversations with those people and just pick their brain, like ask them what did they like about their jobs, what were things that they wish they had known when they were trying to come in as a new employee or stuff like that. And so you got to have this more of a personal relationship with those people. And ironically, one of the people ended up being one of my interviewers for Pathways. So that was kind of ironic, but also made it a little bit tougher because they kind of knew what I was already, so I was trying to be above that. So I think one of the biggest things is networking allowed me to have a good conversation with everyone. And so like Evan said, Pathways, the first rotation is a placement. And then based on that, you go and talk with division chiefs and deputy division chiefs, and you pseudo interview for your next rotation. And then they will actually do a piece of paper that you'll sign and they'll sign, and essentially it guarantees you the next rotation with them. But when it comes to full-time employment, it's completely different. But I think that first opportunity to, like, as soon as I was there, even before I was Pathways, networking with people allowed me to kind of get that communication started already. And I'm a very big face-to-face person, so I think face-to-face communication weighs a lot more than just sending an email to people. But I think that's the biggest thing there.
Yeah, one other side note on top of that, I don't have a lot of experience outside of JSC, so I can't speak on other companies, but at the Space Center specifically, you can pretty much email anyone and just say, hey, I'm really interested in what you do. I think it's cool. Can I come talk to you? And they'll usually talk to you for like an hour just rambling, because everyone loves what they do for the most part, and so it's really easy to talk to them about it. So no matter what company you're at, just emailing people if you're truly interested in having those good conversations, they usually love to see that.
Anyone? Anyone? Bueller. Bueller, thank you. So you can see the website is up just for reference, so that's where you go and just, each one just says, click here to apply today. Yeah, as far as getting into the position, it was the same when I was there. You get placed, your first rotation, you have no say, and then you start talking to other interns, figure out what they're doing, what's of interest to you. I always wanted to be in the EVA group. So as soon as I got there, I applied. But there was a lot of competition because a lot of other interns wanted to be there too, so there were no openings. But on my third rotation, I was able to get there. So I did my third, fourth, fifth, and sixth rotations in EVA. So. Oh, question in the back. See if you can make it. And, all right.
I guess this is more for Dylan and Evan. Just for Pathways, what was kind of the timeline for you guys from when you applied to when you had like your interview to like when you were notified of the position?
So I applied during the fall, so it was technically for spring. And I want to say the application came out in September. We had 3 days, so it was a quick turnaround. Essentially, ours was in USA Jobs. Is it still in USA Jobs? You go in there, essentially create your stuff ahead of time, prepare yourself. Know who you're going to be writing to, so you're writing the HR, so make sure that that's your audience, and you write so you don't use technical jargon that they're not going to understand. Do the story, kind of like Jacob was saying, and I want to say it wasn't until October that we got an email back saying we'd like to have your official transcript. And then in November was roughly when we started having interviews for mine. You were in the spring, right?
Yeah, so I was actually down there on a NASA internships intern. We started a week late because there was government furlough, which was fantastic. So then the second or third week down there, my manager actually came up to me and said, hey, there's a Pathways position opening up next week. And I said, hey, what's Pathways? And then she explained the whole process and told me to apply. So I applied on a Monday in like late February. About a month and a half later, got an email out of the blue saying I had an interview the next week. Did the interview, and then it was about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, no communication, and then they offered me the position.
Yeah, and Dylan, I'm honestly not sure. So this website actually covers everything, including Pathways. So when you click on there, I'm not sure if it takes you to the USA Jobs website or not, but if you scroll through, it'll be so there's the interns that says click here to apply. The next one is Pathways. I click here to apply. So anyway, I would go there first, and then they'll direct you.
If you guys have questions later on, you guys are always welcome to reach out to us. We might not respond quickly because senior design and stuff like that, but we'll get back to you guys as quickly as we can.
Okay, and again, Space Grant, room 1234. You can stop by and ask questions there as well. Anything else, Matt? You got anything? All right. Thank you, everybody.
This UNICOM has been sponsored by Iowa Space Grant Consortium and Aerospace Engineering's Make to Innovate.